finally really did it. You maniacs! You up! Oh, damn you! God damn you all to hell!
Worst movie ever!
Welcome to Worst Movie Ever. I'm Carl, and if you didn't guess by the title and the thumbnail and the intro, the film today on Worst Movie Ever, the contender today, is the 2001 Tim Burton version of Planet of the Apes.
Okay, let's go explain evolution to the monkeys.
Now, all the way back in 2001, this is a pretty star-studded cast, including Tim Roth, Michael Clark Duncan, Paul Giamatti, Helena Bonham Carter, and of course Mark Wahlberg. And it was based on a series of films that was pretty successful in the 60s and 70s, and the Charlton Heston films are still pretty entertaining today. So it made sense to jump back into that series at some point, but maybe they did it just a little bit too early. Now, the very early 2000s, like 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, around that time, Hollywood was making some weird jump backs into movies. Like we got Jurassic Park 3, we got Terminator 3, we got Planet of the Apes, doing reboots. Not quite on a scale that we're seeing now, but they were certainly doing reboots back then too. Now, one thing this film should get a lot of praise for is that around that time when that film was being made, around 2001-ish, around that time, around when films like Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones and AI, Artificial Intelligence, was coming out, and all these films were coming out with terrible CGI, this film focused very much on practical effects, as you'd expect with Tim Burton. However, those practical effects and trying to keep it visually similar to like the 60s and 70s film, not quite the same, but similar, I think that kind of had an impact on the film, because the film ended up having this smaller scale, rather than being a Planet of the Apes, like a small town of the apes. By which I mean, you know, the sets seemed very small. A lot of them on screen now, especially on modern day televisions, you can really tell they're sets. They're like 3 walls, an open-sided wall and a green screen background so they can put a background in behind. A lot of them look like stages or sets, and it doesn't really hold up very well. The practical effects are interesting doing it that way, and I can see why Tim Burton did it that way. It does give it the similar look to the original film and kind of pays homage to it in that way. But perhaps they went a little bit too far paying respect to the old films, tried to become a carbon copy of it, and it was never going to work out. It was never going to be as good as the originals, or at least liked as much as the originals. And this film does have a weird kind of love-hate relationship. Some people love it, most people hate it, but some people do really enjoy it. I think it's just a factor of people love Tim Burton and they will love whatever he does. Personally, for me, he's never been one of my favourite filmmakers. I've never really found a Tim Burton film I've loved, but that's just personal preference. Everyone has their own opinions on that. Personally, I think they could have done with putting more of an original spin on Planet of the Apes, like they did with the most recent Planet of the Apes, which turned out to be brilliant. But the main downfall of Tim Burton's 2001 reboot of Planet of the Apes is the story. The story is where it's weakest. Now, I seem to say on every Worst Movie Ever, now if you haven't seen Worst Movie Ever before, what we generally do is run down the story and decide if it is the worst movie ever. Now, on episode 10 and 11, we officially crowned Star Wars The Last Jedi as the worst movie ever. So the current hunt is for a movie worse than Star Wars The Last Jedi. So we're going to run down the story and you guys can decide whether it's worse than Star Wars The Last Jedi. So without further ado, let's jump into the story, because as I say, it's pretty weak and I should get through this one pretty quickly. So the movie starts out in 2029 on a space station with Mark Wahlberg training a chimp on how to fly a ship. And the overall ship ultimately comes in contact with an electrical storm in space. So the captain of the ship tells Mark Wahlberg to send his chimp buddy friend out into the storm to collect samples, to collect data. So the chimp is sent out into space and ultimately disappears. So Mark Wahlberg jumps in the ship, he's about to escape, the captain tells him not to, but he does it anyway because he's a rebel. So Mark Wahlberg heads out into space to find his chimp friend and ultimately ends up crash landing on a Planet of the Apes. So Mark Wahlberg is stumbling around, he's trying to get his bearings and he comes into contact with some people. All those people are running away and Mark Wahlberg realizes something is chasing them, so he starts running too, and ultimately it's apes who are dressed in really weird uniforms with strange hats for some reason. And the humans are ultimately captured, brought back to the town of the apes. General of the Apes, General Thade, is clearly established as the bad guy and he doesn't like Mark Wahlberg. But ultimately the humans escape with the help of one of the female apes, who weirdly has this sexual attraction to Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, we're pretty smart. The smarter we get, the more dangerous our world becomes.
I knew it. You're sensitive. an uncommon quality in a male.
So the humans are trying to get to Kalima, as the apes call it. And Mark Wahlberg and co get there very easily, without too much effort, too much fight. They get to Kalima pretty quickly. And when they get there, Mark Wahlberg quickly realizes it's his old ship. The one he was just on at the start of the movie. It's crash landed, it's decayed, it's clearly been there for a long time. So he gets to one of the computer terminals, everything still works because it somehow has a unlimited battery, and he finds the data on a TV that tells him the ship followed him to try find him, and ultimately they crash landed, and all the chimps on the ship somehow, they don't really establish how, but somehow all the chimps gained sentience and they took over. Or, you know, they became super smart somehow. They took over, killed all the humans, and that's how the Planet of the Apes started. So Mark Wahlberg goes outside his ship, and there's tons of humans. It was everywhere. Everybody's coming along. So then General Tade's army appears of all the apes. Mark Wahlberg has his army of humans, and ultimately a battle ensues. A battle in smoke or a sandstorm or some fog. I don't know why they have this haze in it, but it's very difficult to see what's going on other than what's right in front of you. It was a poorly done battle scene, and ultimately it's the downfall of the movie. But the battle's going on, and all of a sudden something happens in the sky. Down comes a ship, and inside is the chimp from the very beginning of the movie, Mark Wahlberg's friend, the friend he went after. So all the apes throw down their weapons and they bow down to this chimp who they consider like a god or one of their prophecies fulfilled. And Mark Wahlberg brings them inside the old ship, and then General Tade comes in and has a fight with Mark Wahlberg, ultimately leading to General Tade getting locked on the bridge of the ship. He's ultimately defeated or trapped. And that's all. Mark Wahlberg goes outside, he says his goodbyes to the female chimp who wants him to stay, and she kisses him. And then there's also the other female character who's been in the film for a couple of scenes. I think she had like 4 lines overall, and she kisses him as well. There wasn't really any romantic thing between them too much in the film, so there was no relationship there. She just randomly kisses him at the end of the movie. And then Mark Wahlberg gets in his ship and fucks off. Mark Wahlberg has found the electrical storm in space randomly that brought him to the space thing, so he's going to fly through the storm again, thinking it'll bring him home. And this is where it breaks down even worse. Mark Wahlberg does end up back on Earth. He flies into Washington, you see all the monuments you're used to seeing in all the movies, and he crashes on the steps of the building that has Abraham Lincoln's statue inside it. But he goes inside after he crashes, and the statue's been replaced with a statue of General Tade. And this is established by the writing behind the statue that it is General Tade, who's been on the other planet for some reason, but now he's back on this planet. And then all the cops come, and all the cops are apes, clearly setting up for the second movie. The movie cuts to black, and that's where we leave it, established for the next movie. And it's always the shittest movies that set up for the sequel at the end. Hitman Agent 47 did it. Hellboy, the most recent shitty version. If you haven't seen original versus reboot for Hellboy, check that out just to see how shitty the new version is. That's set up for a sequel too. I hope they never get it. And then Planet of the Apes 2001, the Tim Burton version, that also set up for a sequel. Completely unnecessarily. That's where the story ends. And it was a pretty weak story. Nothing particularly happens. Mark Wahlberg crashes on the planet, he gets captured, he escapes, gets to his ship, has a fight, goes home. Kind of shit.